The Woman with Two Skins. In the days when the earth was fierce and untamed, when kings ruled with iron fists and the air thrummed with the whispers of spirits, Ayamba I of Calabar stood as a titan among men. His name was a thunderclap, feared across the lands, for he had crushed every neighboring tribe, his warriors, leaving trails of blood and ash. Old men and women fell beneath his blade, their bones bleaching under the sun, while the young and strong were bound in chains, dragged to Calabar to toil on his vast farms until death claimed them. The fields stretched endless under the sky, green with yam and cassava, watered by the sweat of slaves and the tears of the vanquished. Ayamba's wealth was boundless, his power absolute, yet his heart harbored one gnawing void. Among his 200 wives, not one had borne him a son. The king's wives filled his palace with beauty and chatter, their laughter echoing through halls adorned with woven mats and carved stools. But as Ayamba's hair greyed and his shoulders stooped, his subjects grew restless, whispering in the marketplaces and under the shade of palm trees. "Our king grows old," they murmured, their voices heavy with worry. "Who will rule when he is gone?" At last they came to him, their heads bowed, and pleaded, "Great king, marry a daughter of the spider, for their kind is blessed with many children, and surely one will give you a son." Ayamba, though skeptical, agreed to appease his people, for their loyalty was the bedrock of his throne. The spider's daughter, Adiha, was brought before him, her form shrouded in an ugly mottled skin that clung to her like a curse. The people whispered that her mother's countless offspring, born in writhing clusters, had marked her with this grotesque visage. Ayamba's lip curled at the sight, his pride recoiling, but he wed her nonetheless, his voice cold as he declared, "She shall be my wife, but she will not dwell among the others." His 200 wives, adorned in bright cloths and glittering beads, sneered at Adiha's appearance, their voices sharp with scorn. "She is unfit to share our halls," they said, their eyes flashing with disdain. "Her ugliness taints us all." So Ayamba built her a separate house, a modest structure of mud and thatch, where she was fed and clothed as befitted a queen, yet mocked by all who passed. Unbeknownst to the court, Adiha's ugliness was a deception, a second skin she wore by her mother's ancient vow. At birth, her mother had sworn to the spirits that Adiha would never shed this grotesque hide, save in the cloak of night, slipping it back on before dawn's first light. Beneath it, her true form was radiant, her skin smooth as polished ebony, her eyes bright as stars, her beauty a secret guarded by darkness. The head wife, a woman of cunning and venom, had learned this truth through whispered rumors and sleepless vigilance. Fearful that the king would discover Adiha's beauty and favor her above all, she sought a juju man in the shadows of the forest, where the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient magic. "Make me a potion," she hissed, her voice low, her hands clutching 200 rods, "something to blind the king to his spider wife, so he forgets her entirely." The juju man, his face scarred by years of communion with spirits, haggled fiercely, his eyes glinting with greed. 350 rods, he countered, his fingers tracing the bones strung about his neck. "Only then will I weave a spell to cloud the king's mind." The headwife paid, her heart pounding with triumph, and mixed the potion into Ayamba's evening meal of pounded yam and egusi stew. For months the spell held firm. The king passed Adiha's house without a glance, her name erased from his thoughts, her presence a ghost in his court. Adiha, isolated and weary, grew tired of the mockery and the king's indifference. After 4 months she fled to her father's web-strewn lair, deep in the forest where spiders spun silken empires. "Father," she said, her voice trembling with resolve, "the king has forgotten me, and I am scorned. Help me reclaim my place." The spider, his many eyes gleaming like beads of dew, scuttled to a juju man of his own, a seer, whose spells pierced the veil of enchantment. The seer cast lots, bones and shells clattering on a woven mat, and saw the headwife's treachery. "Give the king this," he said, handing Adiha a vial of shimmering liquid, its price a fortune in rods. "Mix it into his food, and his eyes will open." That day, Adiaha prepared a small dish of pepper soup, its aroma rich with fish and spices, and laced it with the seer's medicine. She presented it to Ayamba, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "Great king," she said, her voice soft but firm, "taste this humble offering." He ate, and as the flavors burst upon his tongue, the fog lifted from his mind. His eyes widened, seeing her anew. "Adiaha," he said, his voice warm with recognition, "come to me this evening." Joy surged through her, and she bathed in the river, the water cool against her skin, before donning her finest cloth, its colors vibrant as a sunset. That night, when the palace was dark and the stars burned bright, Adiaha slipped off her ugly skin, revealing her true beauty. Ayamba, seeing her radiant form, was struck speechless, his heart kindled with love. They spoke long into the night, her laughter like music, but as the cock crowed, she donned her disguise, and returned to her house. For 4 nights, she repeated this ritual, shedding her skin in darkness, leaving before dawn. In time, to the astonishment of the court, she bore a son, a single child, unlike her mother's multitude, yet a miracle that silenced the jeers. The head wife's jealousy flared anew, a fire that consumed her reason. She returned to the Juju man, her purse heavy with rods. "Give me a medicine to sicken the king," she whispered, "and make him blame his son." The Juju man, swayed by her wealth, crafted a potion that twisted Ayamba's mind. The king fell ill, his body racked with fever, and sought the Juju man's counsel. "Your son seeks your throne," the seer lied, his voice smooth as oil. "To recover, cast him into the river." Ayamba hesitated, his love for his son a flicker in the haze of enchantment, but his chiefs pressed him, their voices insistent. "Do this, or you will die," they said. "Another son may come." At last he relented, and with a heavy heart, he threw his son into the river's churning depths. Adiaha's cries echoed through the palace, her grief a storm that shook the walls. The head wife, undeterred, poisoned the king's mind again, erasing Adiaha for 3 years. In mourning, Adiaha returned to her father, who sought the water, Juju, a spirit of the river's depths. The water Juju had saved the boy, raising him in secret, his strength growing like a mighty tree. When Adiaha bore a daughter, the head wife's malice struck again, convincing Ayamba to cast the girl into the river. The water Juju, ever watchful, saved her too, nurturing her alongside her brother. The water Juju, weary of the head wife's evil, devised a plan. He whispered to the young men of Calabar, stirring their pride, until they agreed to hold weekly wrestling matches in the marketplace. He told the king's son, now a youth of towering strength and uncanny likeness to Ayamba, to compete. "Fear no one," the Juju said, his voice like the rush of water. "My power flows through you." On the day of the grand match, the market was a sea of faces, the air thick with dust and anticipation. The strongest men of Calabar laughed at the boy's youth, but he threw them one by one, breaking bones with his might. The crowd roared, and Ayamba, watching from his throne, awarded him cloth and coins, inviting him to dine at the palace. At the feast, the boy sat beside the king, the head wife on his other side, her eyes gleaming with desire for his beauty and strength. "You are a fine warrior," she purred, her voice honeyed, plotting to claim him as her own. But the boy, wise as he was strong, knew her treachery and spurned her advances, leaving the palace as soon as he could. He told the water Juju all that had passed, and the spirit instructed him to demand a public trial. "Ask the king to judge a case," the Juju said, "and let the guilty face the egg boss' wrath." The next day the boy stood before Ayamba. "Great king," he said, his voice clear as a bell, "call all the land to hear a case. If I am wrong, let the egg boss take my life. If another is guilty, let them face justice." Ayamba, impressed by the boy's courage, agreed, and summoned his people to the marketplace. Adiaha, guided by the water Juju, shed her ugly skin, and appeared in her radiant beauty, her son and daughter at her side. The crowd gasped, and when she embraced her daughter, tears of joy fell like rain. The boy recounted his tale, how the head wife's jealousy had poisoned the king, how she had orchestrated the casting of him and his sister into the river, and how the water juju had saved them. "Judge us, O king," he said, his eyes locked on the head wife, who paled under his gaze. Ayamba, his heart stirred by truth, ordered the Egbos to seize her. They declared her a witch, dragging her to the forest where they bound her to a stake. The whip of hippopotamus hide lashed her 200 times, her screams piercing the air. Before they set her ablaze, her ashes scattered into the river. Ayamba embraced Adiaha, proclaiming her his true queen, and welcomed his son and daughter with pride. A feast lasted 166 days, the palace alive with music and dance. The king decreed that any woman who used medicine against her husband would face death, and he built 3 grand compounds for Adiaha, his son and his daughter, filling them with slaves to serve them. They lived in harmony until Ayamba's death, when his son ascended the throne, ruling with the strength and wisdom born of his trials.